Jose Menendez was living the ultimate American dream. After moving to the United States from Cuba, he got married, had 2 sons, and scored a big-time entertainment job in Hollywood. But all of that was about to be ripped away from him. On one August day, Jose's sons, Eric and Lyle, walked into their family home with rifles and fired at their parents. The police talked to one of their neighbors who mentioned hearing bullet-like sounds around 10 p.m. The police first thought Jose and Kitty's slayings were the work of organized crime, but as they continued to investigate, they found out about some business rivals of Jose's that could have been out to get him too. After the slayings, the brothers set it up to look like a mob hit and pretended to mourn their parents' passing. And they were bawling out with their dad's money. Over the next 6 months, Eric and Lyle spent almost $1 million. Lyle bought 3 Rolexes the day before his parents' funeral. Oh, and at the funeral, Lyle read a letter that his dad wrote him right before he was slain. He said, "I encourage you not to select the easy road. I encourage you to walk the road with honor, regardless of the consequences, and to challenge yourself to excellence. I believe that you will." Well, Eric and Lyle must have a different definition of the word excellence, because what they did was awful. But the whole consequence thing was spot on. They clearly didn't care about consequences at all. Okay, so after Lyle bought the Rolexes, he also bought a Porsche, a bunch of nice clothes, and a hot wing restaurant back in Princeton. Eric bought a Jeep Wrangler, hired a personal tennis coach for $50,000, and invested $40,000 in a rock concert that never happened. Instead of staying at their family mansion in Beverly Hills, both boys decided to live in adjoining condos near Marina del Rey, which doesn't really make sense to me because their mansion was hella nice. I mean, it was over $14 million, so it had to be luxurious. But maybe it was too much for the boys to be living at the scene of the crime? Who am I kidding? It doesn't really seem like they cared. So Eric and Lyle wined and dined at a bunch of fancy restaurants, went on vacations to the Caribbean and London, shelled out a bunch of money on parties, and would even take their mom's Mercedes convertible out for a spin. Wait, I thought Eric just bought a Jeep. Why would he need to drive his mom's whip? Maybe they were just really committing to the whole rich thing where people drive around different cars depending on their mood. If I had that money, I would buy a room full of dogs for each day of the week. Anyway, Eric and Lyle acted like they had won the lottery, and they were expecting to get even more money from their dad's insurance policy, so they had no financial worries in the world. Well, I think we know the motive behind all of this now. And it seems like Eric and Lyle have absolutely no remorse over it either. In an interview with a reporter, Eric said that if he and Lyle were at the house during the attack, they would have tried everything to stop it. Really? Because last time I checked, you were at the house, and you were the ones who attacked them. When asked about his goals, Eric said he wanted to be a senator, and Lyle wanted to be the president of the United States so the two of them could liberate Cuba, their father's home country. Okay, now they're fronting too hard. What happened to playing tennis and making movies? Dr. Oziel was eventually able to get both boys to confess. Eric said they did it to put their mother out of her misery, but Lyle made it seem like a more aggressive act. Dr. Oziel's mistress overheard the recording of the session and went to the police to rat the brothers out. What happened to the whole confidentiality thing? Well, I guess when you're dealing with people taking lives, that just goes out the window. But if it was the mistress that told on them, I wonder what Dr. Oziel had to say about all of this. Apparently, Dr. Oziel and his lady had a rough relationship. The woman reported that her therapist boo was super controlling and aggressive. She claimed he beat her on multiple occasions, and one of his attacks is actually what spurred her to go to the police to report the confessions. An abusive therapist? That's a new one. So, Once the police were tipped off, they arrested Lyle. This was on March 8, 1990. Eric was in Israel for a tennis tournament at the time, but a few days later, he voluntarily came home and was arrested. The brothers were separated from each other and held without bail while they awaited their trial. Right after the arrest, officials found out that Eric had written a screenplay with his best friend, Craig. The screenplay, which was titled Friends, was about a young man who snuffed his parents for the inheritance money. That sounds familiar. Oh yeah, because that's what happened in real life. The judge didn't allow Eric's script to be introduced as evidence at the trial, but his co-writer and best friend Craig testified on the stand saying Eric confessed the crimes to him. Speaking of evidence, the defense tried to say the therapist tapes couldn't be considered since they broke doctor-patient confidentiality, but the judge on their case deemed 2 of the 3 tapes as admissible evidence since Lyle had threatened Dr. Oziel. The process of determining the validity of these tapes as evidence took forever. Well, it took 30 months, but you get the point. The trial began in 1993 and was actually broadcasted on cable TV. Because of that, this case gained a huge following. People were so infatuated by the story. And, I mean, do you blame them? It's probably better than any scandalous television show at the time. A wealthy Beverly Hills family with 2 mysterious brothers who brutally slayed their parents? Yeah, that's pretty engaging. Since they couldn't really claim innocence, the rich and fancy sweater-wearing brothers went a different route. They said their dad had abused them throughout their whole childhood. The jury was super confused at this point. I mean, how do you prosecute 2 young men who iced their allegedly abusive parents? And how do they even know the truth about those allegations? Well, the first trial lasted 4.5 months, and the jury couldn't make up their minds, so they declared a mistrial. Months later, the Menendes brothers went to trial again. This time, it wasn't televised, and I bet people were pissed they couldn't tune in. At the retrial, Eric and Lyle stuck to their abuse claim. But after 5 months in court, they were both found guilty and sentenced to life without parole. Despite their request to stay together, the boys were split up and sent to different prisons. During their time in jail, they actually both got married. Eric married a woman named Tammy, who was his prison pen pal. Their ceremony was in the waiting room of the jail, and their wedding cake was a Twinkie. And no, I'm not making that up. It was literally a Twinkie from a vending machine at the prison. Honestly, I kind of vibe with it. And it's much cheaper than getting a custom cake. Maybe I'll do that for my wedding. Eric and Tammy were even able to kiss at their ceremony. How cute. During their regular visits, the couple was allowed to hold hands, but they were only permitted to hug and kiss at the end. Tammy once said in an interview, the holding of the hands during the visit is everything. Ah yes, holding hands really gets me going. Alright, that's enough of Eric's love story. Let's move on to Lyle. Lyle actually married 2 different women. He first tied the knot with a former Playboy model who ended up divorcing him once she found out he was writing to other women. OMG. I love how writing a letter is seen as cheating when you're in a prison relationship. Lyle's second wife was a woman named Rebecca, who he had known years before his arrest. Rebecca was a magazine editor when Lyle met her, but she went on to become an attorney. I don't know if I'd want her as my lawyer. Do people like being represented by the spouses of big-time criminals? Is that a thing? Eric and Lyle stayed in separate prisons for over 20 years before they were reunited in 2018. During their time apart, they couldn't talk on the phone, but they were able to write letters. They even had a chess game going through the mail. Like, they would write their moves on a piece of paper and send them back and forth. That had to be the longest game of chess ever. When the guards opened the door for the brothers to meet for the first time in decades, they burst into tears. Now, they're able to see each other all the time in jail. They eat their meals together and hang out at the exercise yard. If that's not sibling goals, I don't know what is. Actually, every other pair of siblings who haven't slain their parents. The story of the Menendes brothers has been retold in many TV shows, movies, and comedy skits. People just can't get enough. I can't either. It's such an interesting turn of events with family drama, relationship troubles, spending sprees, sketchy therapists, and prison weddings. And can we talk about how iconic the whole Twinkie thing is? That part really sealed the deal for me. And now I'm craving something sweet. Like this pie. See you next time.